initiatives, including Career Ready You, Design Your Life courses, Freshman Convocation, as well as building new state-of-the-art technology-enhanced active learning classrooms. Another key area of focus has been supporting and implementing institutional diversity, equity, inclusion, and social justice action plans. President Junn has an extensive 35-year history with the CSU, having worked at 5 other CSU campuses prior to joining Stan State. She served as provost and vice president at CSU Dominguez Hills, provost and vice president at San Jose University, associate provost at Fresno State, associate dean of the College of Health and Human Development at CSU Fullerton, and assistant professor at CSU San Bernardino. She also served as a visiting professor at Indiana University. President Junn earned her bachelor's degree in experimental and cognitive psychology from the University of Michigan and a master's and PhD in cognitive and developmental psychology from Princeton University. She is widely published and has written numerous peer-reviewed research and journal articles on topics such as supporting the success of underserved students, the importance of university community engagement and strategies for supporting non-tenured track faculty, especially women and minorities, as well as promoting innovative teaching strategies. Academics is a family affair for President Junn. Her husband is a retired physicist, and her son and his wife are faculty in the history department at Brandeis University. If you have any questions during Dr. Junn's presentation, please submit them in the chat. And now, please join me in welcoming Dr. Ellen Junn.
Thank you, everyone. And thank you, Jess, and everyone in the San Joaquin Unified School District for helping to sponsor this wonderful series called Women Together, Shattering Glass Ceilings, a speaker series. It's one of many that they've organized for. And special thanks goes to Lodi USD for inviting me to be part of the speaker series. So let me start by having, I think, Chelsea, go ahead and share the PowerPoint. So I have a PowerPoint to accompany my talk here. So she gets it prepared. All right, so here we are. And what they asked me to do is to talk a little bit about my leadership journey and to provide some advice or thoughts or insights to all of you who are listening in tonight. I'll be happy to do so. So the next slide, we start with the family history. When people are asked, how did you get here? Often that means understanding a little bit about your family history. Now, each and every one of you, as we look at this map, might think about what your family histories are as well. Now, for my family, it's easier for me to choose to understand my family history in America because my parents were the first in their family to come to the United States from Korea, actually South Korea. And so it was easier for me to get that history. Now, each and every one of you also has a history. So I would say, take time to listen and talk to your parents, your grandparents, your family members. Now with the availability of things like 23andMe and Ancestry.com, all of these things are much more available to you to find out and learn so much more about where your families came from before they came to the United States. So my mother's 92, just turned 92, and so I've been collecting over a period of time a little bit about her and her life journey as well. So I'd encourage all of you, if you have your parents still with you, that is such a blessing, and to ask them questions along the way because it helps you understand what your relationship is with your home countries and with your current your experiences in the US. All right, so let's start with my family history just briefly. I'm not going to tell you the whole story, that would take too long. So next slide. So my family story. Here, what I wanted to share with you. Oh, sorry, there's another slide before this. Oh, there should be a picture of my father. Can you click to the next one? Oh, that's so strange. That is odd. So I'm not sure why, but there was a picture before this. Okay, well, this is fine. We'll just stay here. So my family story actually started with a picture of, I had a picture of my dad. So here, that slide's missing, but it was a coming to America story. So my father was a first generation college student, actually was born in a small island off the tip of South Korea. And he was born during a time when there was a great deal of political issues in the Far East. And so while he was growing up, both he and my mom were in Korea when Japan had occupied South Korea. So they had occupation from another Asian country, Japan. And then, of course, the Korean War happened. And then that resulted in American soldiers coming to South Korea as well. So that he had a lot of, both my mom and my dad had very arduous, difficult historic struggles growing up in South Korea during this time of very complex political, warfare and et cetera. And he had a really quite an extraordinary immigration experience, which is too much detail to go into tonight. But what I will tell you is that he had a very deep belief in American democracy and education, the power of education. He was the first in his family to go to college. His father, who was a farmer in South Korea, wanted to make sure that his son got a good education and that he would hopefully go to America someday to pursue his education. So my father, as a young man in college in Korea, made sure to study English because he knew that he would immigrate from South Korea to come to the United States, primarily for the beauty of American democracy and to pursue his graduate studies. So he then applied and got into doing political science. So he's a political science professor, training at University of Tennessee for his master's, and his doctorate was at University of Illinois Champaign, and he was specializing in international relations. Okay, so the next slide you can go to. Okay, oh, sorry, not that one. Sorry, go back. This is the second one. All right, so that's my father. So my father left Korea. They got married in the village, but never filed it with the government because they knew that they wanted to leave as a married couple. Very difficult to leave to come to the United States after the Korean War. They wanted young people and married couples to stay in Korea and rebuild after the war. So that's why they never filed with the American government. And my father went on a student visa to come to the United States. After he finished his master's degree, he then sent for my mother, got her a student visa for another college. My mother they actually met as high school teachers at a private school in South Korea. My mother was a chemistry teacher. She had been in pre-medical school until the war broke out. And my father was the English teacher there. So she came to the United States and went to another college, and she was redoing her undergraduate degrees because her original institution was burned in the Korean War. There was no record of her diploma or any of that. So she was trying to learn English, and she was majoring in chemistry. And so when she came to the United States, they settled in together, and I was born. So that ended her attempt to complete her medical degree. But like most Korean mothers, they always want to have one child be an MD. So all three of my sisters and I had a tiger mom, my mom, who tried to get all of us to be a doctor. We never succeeded in being MDs, but we became PhDs. So in this time, when we were growing up, my father was very determined to become an American, and he refused to raise us as children in the Korean traditions, and instead he wanted to raise us as American children. So most of you are much too young to know who Dr. Spock is, and it's not Dr. Spock from Star Trek. This is Dr. Benjamin Spock. He was probably the most prolific and well-known pediatrician in US history during the late 1950s and through the 70s. So his book called Baby and Child Care was sort of the Bible of how to raise children in the United States. It was actually the second best-selling book in the nation, the Bible being number one during that time period. And so that he, advocated a whole lot of different, very important and very productive, now supported by the developmental psychology research of how to raise children in a more democratic way. And so next slide. So here's another thing is when I was growing up in Michigan, people would often come up to me and say, "Where are you from?" And I'd say, "Oh, well, I'm from Jenison." And Jenison, as you can see on the map, if you click. Yep, see, there's Jenison. It's a small community. It's very similar to Turlock in size, and it's a kind of an agriculture town. It's right near click, you can see it's right near Holland, Michigan. Keep clicking, next click, and one more click. Oh, okay, so it's right near Holland, Michigan. It's right near Jenison and Grand Rapids. And then they'd say, no, no, where are you really from? I said, well, I lived about 3 years in Macon, Georgia, when I was very young, kindergarten through second, third grade. And they'd say, no, no, where are you really from? I said, oh, so click. Oh, I said, oh, you mean, okay, that's where about Macon, Georgia is. I said, you mean where I was born? Yes, I was born in Champaign, Illinois. So do another click. So you can see the arrow. One more click. There you go. So that's where Champaign is located in Illinois. That's where I was born because my father was getting his PhD there. So I and my sister were born in Champaign. But they would say, no, no, tell us where you're really from. Where are you really from? You're born. Where are you really from? You speak English so beautifully. And so I was telling them where I really was from. And then it dawned on me that they were asking sort of where was my family from, right? So I started to think about how could I answer this question in a way that's more creative? And then I thought about the fact that here I was growing up in Jenison, Michigan, next to Holland, where everyone in my town, we were the only Asian American family in the town. And there was one African American family. There were no Jewish families, no Hispanic families. Everyone was blonde and blue-eyed because they were from the Netherlands, right? So I was trying to think where else would people look like more Netherlands from Holland. So click. So I would say, well, actually, I'm from Sweden. I would say, actually, I'm Swedish because I figured, well, that's sort of like people from Netherlands. Swedes are more blonde hair and blue eyes. And then it would get people laughing and smiling. And then they would understand that I could be actually born and raised in the United States and that, that I was raised to be American. My family did not teach us very much about Korean culture or traditions. They gave us all first names that are American. So click. All right, so here we go. This was during the time of the melting pot. Sometimes they call this the melting pot era in American history. So my parents gave us all American names, which was very frowned upon by families that emigrated from Korea. They would never dare to give their children American names. But my parents decided we are in America, we're going to become Americans, we'll raise our children like Americans. So we all had American first names. My parents then, of course, wanted to be naturalized citizens. So in 1968, they actually followed Dr. Spock that said you should have a family council where you actually sit the children down and make decisions as a family, give your children the voice. So they would say, what should dad's name be? What should mom's name be? And my family, my mother was named Young Suk, my father is Sung Juk. And after discussing and talking, they chose their final names, which is now their names today. They went from Sung Juk and Young Suk to Bob and Sue. And so again, they were becoming very Americanized, and we were proud and happy to be Americans. So, so this melting pot metaphor was something that was very common during the 60s and 70s. But now the metaphor has changed. Instead of saying you have to melt away and forget your original country of origin, your language, your traditions, your history, now the metaphor is more like a salad bowl, that people come from everywhere, and we should understand and appreciate all the different ingredients that make a salad so delicious. So this is a change in the historic sort of thinking about how Americans perceived immigrants from the melting pot days to now more of a salad bowl. Okay, next. All right, so as I said, after my father finished graduate school, we went to Georgia. My father had his first professor job at the Mercer College, or now Mercer University in Macon, Georgia, deep South. And that was a segregationist state until 1964, 1965. And that was the period of time during which my parents moved us there. As I said, I was about 3-4 years old when I first arrived. And it was a time of great civil unrest. There was a lot of unconcealed racial hatred, bigotry, and discrimination. And I remember watching this, but I was only 4, 5, 6, 7. And at that point in time, we didn't talk much about what was happening, but I could see it all around me, and then directed also to myself and to my own family. I have vivid memories, very difficult memories as a child of walking to school and other people sometimes spitting on me because I was not white, or pretending to shoot us and saying, "Go home, Japs." They assumed that we were Japanese, and thinking about Pearl Harbor, for example. So this is where I had a very strong wish to understand and commit to diversity, equity, inclusion, and social justice. So that has always stayed with me from my very early days. And because there was so much difficulty living in the Deep South at that time, my father decided to move us to further north, and that's when we moved to Jenison, Michigan, and he became a professor at Grand Valley State University, a state college in Michigan. Okay, next. All right, so here's a little bit about my family. Again, 3 sisters. I'm the oldest, as you can see there. That's me on the telephone. I'm a talker, even back then. And so there's me, my sister Elise, were both born when my father was finishing his graduate studies, and my sister Jane, my baby sister, is born in Macon, Georgia. That's my graduation. I graduated in bicentennial year, 1976, at that time. Next. And then this is a little bit of my educational pathway. After undergraduate, after high school, I went first to the University of Michigan. My major was psychology in cognitive science or cognitive psychology. And then from there, went on to Princeton, where I finished my master's and doctorate in developmental psychology. And then do you see all the little mascots all along the bottom? And so this is the funny part, is that I just love learning, just enjoy learning so much that what does this mean? This tells you after I did my undergrad and my grad, I never left college. So each one of those are mascots for university where I have been since graduating from my PhD. So if you click, you can see all of the jobs. So 37 years, click again, and there they are. You heard our moderator mentioned, some of my jobs. So this is just an example. So I started at Indiana University, as you can see, and then went into the CSU. And so I'm now at the 6th and final CSU at Stan State as president. So click. All right, so if you want to understand the CSU, there are 23 campuses of the CSU. We have almost 500,000, 485,000 students now currently enrolled in degree programs in our 23 campuses. And I have had the tremendous good fortune to have been able to work at a total of 6 of the different 23 campuses. And so you can see them numbered there. One, I started at San Bernardino, and I moved to Fullerton. And I didn't jump around irrationally. I'll explain that later. But what happened here is that my first job after Indiana was at San Bernardino, but I was living in Anaheim Hills. So I was driving 51 miles each way, 102 miles round trip every day. And so after my son was born, I needed to find a closer campus. So that's when I moved to Fullerton, stayed there for 17 years until my son graduated from high school, and then got an offer to apply for a job at Fresno State, and went there. And so from Fresno onward to where we are now, every time I moved, it was because someone called me and said, "You've been nominated to serve, to run for a provost job. You've been nominated to be a president. We want you to apply." So my pathway has been very unusual because people have sometimes asked me questions about why did you choose to do what you currently do? And I would say that it is largely one that was not something I had ever considered, that things would happen. So I'll explain that in a moment. So next. All right, so this is a question I just mentioned. People would say, well, when did you decide you wanted to be a university president? And the answer to that was never. I had never thought about being a president, let alone a provost, let alone, an associate provost. So if you click, so my answer is, it really is serendipity. So click again. So serendipity, I would say I'm a serendipitous president in the sense that serendipity is defined as an occurrence and development events by chance in a happy or a beneficial way. And to me, the definition of serendipitous is you have to be prepared, then have good luck or good fortune of being in the right place at the right time. And so that's why it was never a decision that I had in the back of my head, someday I'm going to shoot to become a president. No, it was that I happened to have the right skill sets, and people then would invite me to apply. So that's not the usual route. So what I would say to you, and you'll hear from some of my advices I'll give to you soon, is that you can't always expect serendipity, but you can always be prepared. If you are prepared, if you can show that you have the right skill sets and the right kinds of accomplishments, then when the right position opens up, you will be ready. And that is the combination of luck and being prepared. Next. All right, so this is, I just wanted to capture in a kind of collage form, just what it's like to be president in the Central Valley. It is one of the most beautiful places in the state. It's one of the most fertile agriculturally, certainly. As you all know, we grow about 50% of all the fruits, vegetables, and nuts for the nation and indeed for other countries around the world. So it is a very, very important area that's often forgotten and neglected because we get overshadowed by the big parts of California, the urban San Francisco, LA, San Diego, the coastal cities, and yet we're extremely vital for the success of not just the state, but the whole nation. Okay, so these are some of the pictures of my favorite places. You can see examples of pictures from my own campus, the water fountains that are, ponds, our ginkgo trees. Of course, we grow a lot of almonds. There's a Gallo Center. We also have a lot of diversity, Assyrians, for example, Portuguese, etc. Our ducks on campus. Okay, next. All right, so here's another interesting thing. As you heard the moderator explain, I'm the first Asian American, Korean American woman president of a 4-year campus in the United States. And so the question that I'm going to ask to all of you is, how many Asian American or API Women University presidents have there been in the history of America so far? Can you guess? Try and think about what you might guess. Mary saying 5. Well, here's Judy Sakaki. She and I were both appointed the same year. Adrian says 2. Someone else just said 4, right? Judy Sakaki was the first one to be appointed as a Japanese American woman of a 4-year university. 3, 2, okay. So click. Here's the answer. I'll get to, oh gosh, where is that slide? All right, don't know where that slide went. All right, maybe it's after this slide, so let's keep going. So here is, you see the people standing up, going up the ladder, right? And what happens if you're a woman on the ladder? What did you hit? You see that picture? Do you know what that picture refers to, the cartoon picture? It is what we often call the glass ceiling, women's glass ceiling, yes. So now the question is, for API, for Asian Pacific Islander women who are going up the ladder, we hit the glass ceiling too. But in fact, if you click again, you'll see that we call this, click again, the Asian bamboo ceiling, all right? So, and as Sheryl Sandberg said, that you have to understand that careers are not a ladder, it's more like a jungle gym. It's a lot more complicated than a simple ladder, and there are all kinds of potential barriers that exist for people as they ascend the ladder. All right, so next slide. Okay, so here's the answer. So the true answer is, and I actually had the State Library of California pose this as a research question, and about 3 months after I was inaugurated, they sent me a letter in the email to say that they had done all their research and found at that time there were only nine presidents who were women of Asian descent who had ever been appointed as a president in the United States since the first university was founded. And so this picture shows you that there are now today only 13 Asian American women presidents of 4-year colleges or universities. And as you can see there, of those 13, only 8 are current presidents. So the very first one was not appointed until 1998, was the very first Asian American woman president in the entire United States. And then Renu Kaur, she was appointed in 2008. She's still the current president. So all the ones that are in yellow are presidents that are still serving right now. So there's 8 of us that are still serving right now. And as you can see, what's so interesting is if you look at the dates, you can see that Judy and I were appointed in 2016. And then look, there was one other in 2017, 2 more in 2018, and then 2 more in 2021. Okay, so the trend is starting to pick up a little more. But if you think about it, here's the interesting conundrum is that when you think about going to college, and most of you have gone to college, you can remember clearly having had one or two, maybe more, or you saw certainly many more Asian American professors on your campus who were teaching you in the classroom, but very few make it up past even being department chair, very few deans, very few vice presidents, and very few, now as you can see, very few presidents, particularly among women. And this is true not just for education, but it's also true for government. There are many fewer Asian Americans who are mayors, congressmen and women, senators, et cetera. This is also true in sports, NCAA sports. It's also true in business, CEOs of Fortune 500 companies. Again, Asians are much less well represented relative to their proportion in American society. So these are all, that's why it's called the bamboo ceiling. So they're, even though we're often seen as successful, Asian model minority myth, we still tend not to be able to be at the highest echelons in American society. So it's an interesting finding. Okay, next. All right, so I just want to spend the remaining time just going over some lessons learned that I've learned and some suggestions for leadership success for those of you who are interested in moving up and expanding your horizons. And what I would say to you is please bear in mind that these are just lessons and insights that have come from me, and it might not necessarily apply for your situation. And this, of course, these are lessons that are especially appropriate if you are in education field, certainly higher education, and most of you are in working with the school district, so that is, probably similar. But every field is different. Obviously, these lessons may not apply if you're, say, an artist, or say you're a musician or of some kind. Then this may not necessarily apply, right? So it's a little bit domain specific. All right, next slide. So I have about 9-10 different things just to share with you. So first of all, understand that you're on a journey, and the journey starts every day. Your life, all of us have a limited lifespan. So every day is something to cherish and to relish and to enjoy. And while you're here, if you want to aspire to be a leader, then you have to have some things in your head and take some actions. Okay, so the first thing I would say that's very important, and a lot of this is also stuff that I've learned as a psychologist, as a cognitive developmental psychologist, is to always be comfortable about who you are, and that you have to think about yourself as a work in progress. There's no such thing as a perfect person. There just isn't. So be comfortable about who you are and understand that you can always grow and improve, right? So no matter what happened to you when you were younger, try not to blame, try to overcome your insecurities and work to believe in yourself, because you are worthy and you are talented no matter what has happened in the past, because every day you can grow in your wisdom and your skills, your sense of forgiveness. And the truth is, there's so much research to show that the power of the human mind, your mind, and your ability to be resilient is just extraordinary. So never doubt yourself. So as a future leader, I would also say that you shouldn't be afraid to share a little bit about your unique background, your lived experiences, your point of view, but also to listen, not just to talk, but to listen in authentic and constructive ways, especially now as more and more of us are attuned to the importance of diversity, equity, inclusion, and social justice. So in keeping this, sharing something about your background, your family background, your experiences, that helps to build trust and helps people understand what your perspective is, what you lived through, what your life shares in terms of your own experiences. So in doing so, I say that my suggestion is try to be gentle whenever you can. Try to extend kindness, be reflective when you listen, and include others to try and understand their perspective whenever possible. Okay, so who are you? And be comfortable about who you are. And you can always grow and change. Number 2, click. All right, so I would say if you want to aspire to be moving up the professional ladder, then you must have at your core, you have to aspire to become an outcomes-driven high performer. What does that mean? That means that you have to hold yourself to high performance standards, and you have to be willing to push yourself out of your comfort zone and complete your work, no matter what job you have, to complete your work to meet the goals of your workplace and higher, right? And so if you are a high performing employee, you're going beyond the norm. You're not doing everything that everyone else is doing. You're not even just doing, oh, a good job, a very good job. You're going beyond the norm. And you showed this high kind of performance by documenting strong or excellent progress or outcomes. You know, what can you, anybody can say, well, I was on this committee, I was on this committee, I was on that committee, but what can you show that you did to contribute to the success of that committee? How did you assist? What products came out of that committee? What program was implemented, et cetera, et cetera. So in addition to being a high performer, you also have to show that you're working hard. That's obvious if you're a high performer. But most importantly, that you're working effectively as a team player, You can't do this alone. You have to be part of a team. No matter where you go, you can never do anything alone. Even if, even as a president, I cannot do anything by myself. It takes a team, a wonderful, high functioning team to work together, right? So this was easy because I had a tiger mom that was always saying, you got to do more, you got to do more. You can never get an A minus, et cetera, that kind of thing. But that we had to be effective, high performing, and working as a team. Okay, that's number 2. Number 3. All right, so how do you become a high performer? Well, if you're in higher education if you're in almost any industry, if you can show that you are a knowledge seeker, that you're inquisitive, you're always trying to understand more, you always want to learn more. Why did this happen? Why did that happen? Why did this not happen? What happens if we do this or that? So if you can show that you're a knowledge seeker, that you're genuinely wanting to learn and wanting to improve in whatever the goals of your workplace are, then people will notice, wow, this person's always thinking, they're always trying to get more information. They're always trying to understand what are the next steps and so forth. So that means if you're a knowledge seeker only, that is not going to necessarily get you anywhere. You can find a lot of people who can spew out facts. You don't even need that. You have Google. You can just Google anything and it'll spew out facts. What's much more important is what do you do with those facts, right? So if you go beyond by using your critical thinking, your analytical, creative, critical thinking, strategic problem solving skills that you often learned in college, and that you can apply that to the workplace, then you are starting to do something really meaningful. You're taking a lot of information, a lot of knowledge, you're trying to make sense of it, and that helps drive problem solving and creating more solutions to problems that you face. Are you following me? Yes, I hope so. So this is being not just a knowledge seeker that just says, oh, I want to put all these facts in my head. No, you need to understand, analyze, creatively, critically, analytically, and say, how does this solve problems? All right. So one part of this is just becoming more informed at your workplace. Read beyond what you are given at work. Go and search other school districts if you're working in a school. Look at other universities if you're in higher ed. Become knowledgeable and informed about what's going on. Be a sponge, acquire more information, but do something with it. You reflect on it, you analyze it, you discuss it with others, you confer, you give resources to others, and you work together to understand and make recommendations. Okay, that's number 3. Number 4. Click. Okay, so this is again from psychology. It's called observational learning. Turns out to be one of the most important and perhaps higher cognitive levels of thinking, that you can learn simply by watching others, by observing others, learning from others. And that means paying attention to not just the successes, but really paying attention to where there are failures or breakdowns. Because turns out that when you talk about failures, many people are afraid. They're saying, oh, I could never do that. I'm afraid of failing. Well, you should never be afraid of failure. Try to embrace it and learn from it. It is truly a fact of life that failure, and this is again shown in the research labs, failure can be one of the most powerful learning mechanisms because it provides much greater information and feedback than simple success. If a person succeeds, you don't know which factors contribute to the success. There could be any number of factors or multiple factors together. So having a failure helps you analyze, well, what caused that failure? And then you now know what that whatever caused that failure is going to be an important aspect that you must consider for future, correct? So don't fear failure. You have to accept it. As you can see in this little quote here, failure is not the opposite of success. It is actually part of success. Failure is part of success. If you are going to succeed, it is inherently the truth that there will be failures along the way. There is not a single person on the planet who has never failed at some point. That is a fact, incontrovertible. So why be afraid of failure? You know that you will learn from it, that you can embrace it and learn from it. The key is always, when you do confront a failure, is to reflect on it. Don't let it bruise your ego. Sure, you can go home and cry about things and wail about it for just get the emotions out, but then stop and say, well, what did I learn from this? How can I process this? What can I do next time? How can this help me for the future? And get practice, learn how to, be more comfortable, that this is just a natural part of success, is running into roadblocks, running into failures. Okay? So learn for it. It is part of your success. Okay. All right, next is number 4. Number 5, next click. Okay, so here's the next piece is, women often don't dream big. Sometimes we second guess ourselves, or we think, oh, I can't do that because I have children, or I want to have children, or my husband won't go here, and we put all these road barriers in there. So one thing to do is, there's nothing wrong with dreaming big. You can always scale back, but if you dream big, then it opens up your mind to thinking of, well, if I dream big in this way, but what if I dream big in that way? You can have multiple, goals and aspirations, and it allows your mind to freely associate with larger options. So I would say, if you want to dream big, then the most important thing that you must do next is you have to assess the gap between your skills now and what the skills are required for that big dream, the big dream job, all right? So big dream, so you can see in the center here, it says dream big, set goals, take action. Absolutely right. And the next little picture shows the gap. Here's your current state, here's your desired state, and then what that gap is, you do that gap analysis and find out what is your action plan. And you can do this a little bit at a time, but this is how you can start exploring. You can, take sticky notes, and each day that you might say, well, one day I want to do this, another day I might do that, but draw up at least a sense of where you might want to go. Because remember, we all are here on the planet for a certain number of days. And if you want to dream big, there's nothing wrong with that. But then if you want to actually get there, you have to take some action steps, and you have to prepare yourself. So the first thing to do if you're going to dream big is pursue your education. Obtain the highest degree that's needed for your specific future goal. Don't just get degrees because it sounds good to have a degree. Ask yourself, in this job, what is the best degree that most people at the highest level have to have that job, right? And it doesn't, and sometimes education is not required. I mean, think about Steve Jobs or Bill Gates. Bill Gates went to Harvard. He dropped out after freshman year. The rumor had it is that he had said that he was one of the smartest kids in Seattle as a high school student. He went to Harvard, and he found out there were a whole lot of people who were smart, if not smarter than him. And he got, connected with building microcomputers as an undergrad, and then he dropped out. So education is not necessarily always the case, but you have to look at the job and ask yourself, what degrees are the best degrees that will help me know how to do this job well? And that you can only get by looking at all the people that you would wish to have their jobs and look at what degrees do they have. Work backwards, right? All right, number 2 is you must, no matter what job you get, if you are going to be at the height of a pyramid in any kind of business, education, whatever it is, you must do number 2. You have to improve your communication skills. Because if you don't have good communication skills, it will be very difficult for you to lead. And communication skills is at least 2 things. Public speaking is one thing, and your writing is going to be critical. If you want to advance, you have to have strong public speaking skills and strong writing skills. And I would also add good listening skills. It's terrible if you can do both of those things, but not listen and not hear all of the people and the viewpoints that are being expressed all around you, right? So it's communication skills are absolutely key. All right, so then number 3 is how can you start doing some of this, getting these skills is, I would say, in your current workplace setting, volunteer. At every job, there are always some areas where people have committees that they could sit on. Volunteer to get out of your comfort zone. Let's say you're afraid of budgets, you're afraid of numbers. Well, you could volunteer to sit on the budget committee or to be helping somehow in the budget committee. Or, I don't know what you could check and find out. So if you want a job that requires budgetary skill or oversight, then how do you get there? If you're not in that kind of a job, well, you have to think about volunteering, getting committee work, or the other thing you can do is you can join professional organizations. Let's say, I don't know, if you want to learn how to do conflict negotiation. Well, there's societies of conflict negotiations, and you can join them as a member, and you can get access to their publications, their magazines, they have conferences, you can go meet people and network. So even if you don't have a job in that area, you can actually get experience by networking and being part of a professional organization in the field that you're interested in. Okay? So volunteer is one way, joining professional organizations is another. All right, next one is number 6. All right, this again is similar to the communication, but it's bigger than that. And that is enhance your emotional intelligence. Sometimes they call it an EQ, like IQ is intelligence quotients. Well, emotional intelligence is EQ. And what that means is you need to enhance, cultivate, grow, support your interpersonal, what sometimes the industry calls soft skills. The hard skills is like, your analytic, your mathematical, your quantitative skills. But soft skills have to do with your emotional intelligence. So these are some pointers that you could think about, is to be humble, to always be asking questions, to be curious and find out and listen actively as people share with you, whether it's their stories or their information. Another very important part of emotional intelligence is you have to learn to manage your emotions in appropriate and constructive ways. Then you can, if you are doing those things, then you can start to network. And when you network, the goal is to build trusting professional relationships and that go beyond a single issue. So you can agree to disagree on one issue, but then because you've built a trusting relationship with that person, you may not agree on one issue, but you may agree and be supporters and collaborators on another. So I think sometimes people think that if they don't believe me on this, I'm cutting them out of my life. I don't want anything to do with them in their work life, private life, nothing. But that's where I think team sports is one that is really good for women, because it teaches you how to win and to lose. And that even if you lose, you can go back and have lunch or dinner or go to happy hour with the same people that were on the opposite team, because you can still build this professional relationship that goes beyond single issue. So building professional, authentic relationships is important. And then obviously treating everyone with respect. I already talked about this: respect, care, inclusion, openness. And not only that, to show that you appreciate them. So say thank you. Show your appreciation for people, especially for people who work for you, under you as well. And then let's see, and then cultivate your sense of humor. Don't forget, if sometimes life is so crazy, all you want to do is cry. So you have to find a way to turn that upside down and find a sense of humor, laugh about things, certainly cry about them sometimes, but that's normal. That's natural human emotion. But also to understand that you can enjoy, laugh, hug, and have a good time. All right, next, number 7. All right, so here's again where if you want to move up in your professional life, then you must commit to intentional planning. So remember that just having hope and optimism, yeah, those are wonderful things, wonderful motivators. Oh, I have hope someday I'll achieve this, or I'm optimistic, I'm an optimistic person. But those two things alone, those don't constitute any kind of strategic action step. So instead, you have to say, what is my intention and how am I going to plan for it? You have to actually plan intentionally for intentional results. So set small manageable action steps in your gap analysis, and to chart your progress, reward and celebrate yourself every time you reach a step on your journey. And very important, to find trusted mentors who will help you along the way. They can help you manage your steps, they can give you feedback, they can be your confidant, and you choose different kinds of mentors for different kinds of things. Some you might want just as emotional support network, others you might want for career, others you might want for other kinds of things. But you have to talk to people and go do research. You can go on LinkedIn, you can see all the different kinds of degrees and career pathways, read autobiographies, read it. There's and so much information accessible to you on the web nowadays for free. Okay, next, number 8. Okay, this is so important. And in my view, this has to be your core. You should never compromise your moral compass, your sense of humane principles, and your ethical integrity. These are core attributes that, to me, affirm the importance of all of these values. Human dignity, human worth, and human value should ideally be your foundation, and you should always rely on those core values to inform not just your perspectives, but your behaviors. And if you consistently rely on those principles, especially when you're confronted with difficult or challenging situations, then that will enable you to rise above, will allow you to transcend a lot of the noise and help you build trust and respect with others. If you can hold these in a principled way to help guide you, especially when things are tough to make decisions, is ask yourself, is this do these courses of action, are they humane? Are they morally appropriate? Are they ethical? Okay, so those are things I would say that you have to have somewhere in your core. Okay, next, number 9. And this is the always tried and true hard question of work-life balance. If you're going to do all these things, if you're going to be a high performer, if you're going to have outcomes and you're deciding how to get knowledge and you're analyzing and critiquing, then where do you find time? So again, this is a core commitment you make to yourself, and you say that you have to hold sacred and safeguard your personal balance with your family and your support networks, all your friends and other support networks. And as I said, no one can achieve anything significant going it alone. And in order to avoid stress and burnout, just remind yourself of that airplane analogy with the oxygen mask. You cannot serve everybody without taking care of yourself first, because if you burn out, then you can't put the mask on your child. Let's say if you have a child on the airplane. So take time out, put it into your schedule and this is what I have to do. I just have to put into my schedule to take care of your physical health, put in time for your leisure time, make sure that you're leaving time for your own mental and psychological health. Try to enjoy your life and be present, even if you don't have a lot of time. Being present with your family, your friends, and your support network is having that quality time is can be more important than having lots of time, but not focusing in and being present when you are there with your family. So here's a next kind of personal commercial. So click. So this is my mom's bragging rights. So I went through a very difficult divorce when my son was 8 and became a single mom, single working mom. And I want to just say that even though I had a lot of, very significant things that happened in my life, which I'm not going to go into here, but just to say that I have a son. Here, there's a picture of him on the left. He's graduating in the cap and gown. He graduated from Harvard. And then the middle picture is of him. He went on to Columbia University, where he just finished his PhD 2 years ago. And he's married with Emily on the far right. And she's a doctoral student from NYU. She graduated in 2019. And they are now at Brandeis, and both in the history department. And then my husband, my long-suffering husband now, he is on the bottom, and he's a retired physicist, Alan Greenberg. So if you make time, quality time, and be present with your family, you can, no matter what the circumstances and how difficult life can be. I've certainly had a lot of that in my life, that you can still go on to have, raise a very wonderful family. So next slide. So final words of advice, a couple quotes that I think are really true for me is that song, remember that song, "What doesn't kill you makes you stronger." It is so true. The research shows that when anyone confronts calamity, disaster, tragedy, that you learn to build skills, and skills that you would never have learned had you not suffered, had you not had some tragedy or issue to take, that to confront. And so similarly, the phrase, "May you live in interesting times," times that are turbulent, like now, we're all living through COVID times. We're all learning new skills, new ways of coping, new ways of thinking about the world and our work and ourselves. So all of these things together will build new skills, new perspectives, new strength. You are building strength and new opportunities to think about the world in a different way than if you had just a perfectly beautiful, non-eventful life, right? So my final words of advice are: stay positive, be real, be authentic, be brave, try to take some risks because nothing can substitute for actual experience. Be open to creativity because if you want, whenever there's a calamity, if you're open to creativity, then that sparks innovation. When you have a barrier, then you can be creative, open up new ways of thinking, and innovation can come that could surmount that barrier. And again, keep your sense of humor, have fun, and enjoy your journey. So the last slide, second to the last slide here, so click, is now, I'm not a big fan of Facebook, but I think that Sheryl Sandberg has some extraordinary, she wrote a couple of very extraordinary books. She had an extraordinary tragedy when her husband died of cancer and she had 2 young children. And so I wanted to share with you a couple of her quotes. So one of her quotes are in the gray box there. It says, "I've never met a man or a woman or a man who stated emphatically, 'Yes, I have it all.' Because no matter what any of us has and how grateful we are for what we have, no one has it all." So I agree with her. Nobody does have it all. That is a false hill to climb. We all have different aspects. And what she also says, it's the ultimate luxury to combine passion with contribution. It's also a very clear path to happiness. And those of us, most of us listening in tonight, are in education of one form or another. And education is contributing to society and to improving, the welfare of children or young adults or adults in college. So if you love education, then you have a very clear path to happiness. Because if that's your passion and you would love this, then the combination together, passion and meaningful contribution, is one of the stronger predictors of life satisfaction and life happiness. So I will say one final thing, since this is a talk about women climbing the ladder, is she also has a nice quote. I didn't put it in here, but it said, "If it's true that we could live in a world that's equal for both boys and girls, men and women, then what you would hope to see, if that was truly true, then what would you hope to see? You would see that 50% of the highest companies in the United States would be run by women and 50% would be run by men. And if that's also true for men and women's roles, then 50% of the households would be run by men and 50% would be run by women. But there's still disparity even today in 2020, in 2021, about where that exists. So this is why her book I thought was so powerful, and I want to close with this quote. She says, "I hope you find true meaning, contentment, and passion in your life. I hope you navigate the difficult times and come out with greater strength and resolve. I hope you find whatever balance you seek with your eyes wide open. And I hope that you, yes, you, have the ambition to lean in to your career and run the world because the world needs you to change it." So I think that was a beautiful quote from Sheryl. So if you go to the next click, that's a question and answer. And then next click are just some, I thought, nice thoughts that you might have. So with that, Chelsea, please open up the questions for a time period for questions and answers.
Thank you so much for your presentation. That was wonderful. We had quite a bit of chatter in the chat, so I'm just going through the questions right now. And it looks like we have, let's see here. First question is from Anonymous, which is, what is the best advice you've ever received and why?
Uh, let's see. I think the best advice. Well, I've had so many people share different things along the way, but I would say one of the most important is just um, to know that hard work and having faith in what you're trying to do is some of the strongest motivators for me, and then especially trying to make a difference for the underserved. I've always had a very strong DEISJ motivation that I tend to go to places where I can help the underdog. Um, there are some people that want to go only work at the most successful companies, and I would like to work in places where they need more support. And so the Central Valley, it feels that way to me, is that we need more support, more visibility, those kinds of things. So I think people who talk about those have been really important for me.
Absolutely agree. As someone who grew up in Fresno in the Central Valley, my family's from here, I totally agree that we need a lot more people to come back here and develop this community.
Absolutely.
A question from the Manteca Unified School District Communications team, of which they have 5 female leaders among them this evening tuning in. They asked, if you are a leader, what is the best way to provide opportunities for other women to grow?
Well, it is something that we're trying to do on our campus. So we have created, I've done this at several campuses, is we created something called the Women's Campus Connection. So it is a campus group led by primarily women, actually all women for now. And we host a speaker series just like you are doing here at Lodi. So congratulations, you're doing the same thing. And also I have tried to bring in outside consultants to do leadership exploration. So we had ran a program, a guided leadership discovery program with Annette Nellen, who's a professor at San Jose State, and that ran this past spring. And so they had books to read and they did some assessments of themselves, as well as started charting and working on their intentional plan, their goals of where they'd like to go. So that it was attended by both men and women, by both faculty and staff. So we are doing things on the campus level. And then of course, I also serve and sit on a whole number of different committees, both professional organizations like American Association for State Colleges and Universities. And I'm on the executive board of what's called the Millennial Leadership Institute. So I have 2 or 3 potential people who aspire someday to be a president or a provost. And so I actually mentor them as part of that program. And I work with other organizations like College Futures to really think about how can we intentionally grow the pipeline of leaders, especially potential leaders of color, minority leaders. So I do this in a whole variety of ways.
Oh, that's wonderful. We have a question from one of our committee members, one of our Women Together committee members. They ask, if you could do something different in your career, what would it be and why?
Oh gosh, I don't know. I mean, I guess the other thing I really do enjoy is cooking. So I do enjoy cooking. I love art museums. I love watching film. So it could be something completely non-intellectual, perhaps. But ultimately, for me, it's always been that, like I said, the combination of meaning, something that is doing something that improves the greater good, improves society, improves people, and then finding enjoyment in that as well. But those are some of my hobbies.
Great. And then we have another question from one of our committee members. How do you balance such a high profile job along with self-care and other personal priorities? I know you kind of touched on that during the presentation, but maybe you could extrapolate it.
Yes. So like I said, when you get to this kind of level, my calendar is insane. So, my office staff, I have this incredible assistant, Nareth, who just is a wizard with my calendar. So we just have to budget in, when I can take a walk to try and exercise. So I've actually exercised during COVID. Instead of gaining weight, I've actually lost a little weight during COVID. My doctor was like, how did you do that? Every one of her patients has gained weight. And so, you literally schedule it in. And I have a Fitbit, so it tells me when to go to bed, which I don't always pay attention to. I'm a night owl person. So, but I track my exercise, my steps, and I try to get time for myself to do leisure activities to sort of decompress late in the evening or on weekends. So you just have to build it in. If you're as busy as I am, you have to literally schedule it. But if you're not, you can still find ways to put that into your routine and make it part of your regular routine.
Love that. That's a good idea. I might recommend that to my boss who is on the line this evening as well.
Very good.
As a longstanding superintendent. We have another question from the Manteca Unified team. They asked, is there a recommended survey that you would suggest for someone who wants to assess their skills? And if so, how do you chart your progress?
There is not a standard item because it really depends on the jobs. What you got to look at what job that you're aspiring to. And one way to find out is that if you're at a workplace, usually then there is going to be an announcement that says we're looking for, let's say, a superintendent. So you can find copies of the advertisement that says we want to hire a superintendent. It may not be at your school district. You can find them all over the state. Could be in another unified district even within your county or outside of your county. And look at the position description that says the candidate must have these required, skills, and then it'll say preferred qualifications. And one of the things that you can do is you can just draw up a document that you copy and cut and paste all the characteristics or required on the left side of a table. And then on the right side, you put in all of what you have. And then you can see, oh my gosh, I have nothing in budget. I have nothing in community relations. I have nothing in fundraising, right? So you can then say, well, then how can I get that? So that's when you can go to your supervisor and say, I would love to learn a little bit more about how I can help, the school district, with fundraising or whatever it might be. So you can start planning that out. So there's no test per se. And this is where the power of observation is critical. Because I had worked at 5 other CSUs and 1 other public in Indiana, I have seen a lot of leaders, and I've seen a lot at all levels. Department chair, I was a department chair, and you look at everything at all levels. And every time you go in with inquisitive questioning and you say, wow, I wonder why they made that decision. And then you look at what happened and you say, wow, I think I would do that because that was really successful, or I will never do that because that really turned out badly. But again, just because you watch it in one place, it might work at another place. Context matters. So what might work in one school may not work in another. So you have to use your intuition, your emotional intelligence, and to have good backup people that you can talk to who are familiar with where you are or where you want to go, who can give you advice. Well, here in Lodi, this would work. It would never work in Turlock, right? So you need to have that kind of ability to triage and get converging evidence as well. But I'm sorry, there is no one test.
I know, I wish I'd like to take it myself.
Now, I can say there are some for presidents of universities. ASCU, American Association for Education of Young Children, ASCU, State Colleges and Universities, excuse me, is one that has a 13-item sort of self-assessment that can also be given to your your colleagues to assess. So it's like a 360, but that is if you want to become a university president.
Wonderful, good to know. Not that I will be using it, but good to know. I have a question. I've asked it to some of our other speakers throughout the speaker series that we've held. How have you juggled or managed being likable versus appearing confident when ascending through your career? Because I've struggled with that personally, that I want to be likable, I want to get along with folks, I want to develop relationships, but I obviously want to be seen as confident. So how have you managed that?
Well, here's the thing is that being likable is not a goal. I think a lot of people say, well, to move it up, to get to the top, you have to be likable. And, there's a correlation, but it's not causal. So you don't need to, because I think once you hold it up as a goal, be likable, then you compromise everything else. because then you will make the wrong decision because you want to be liked rather than because it's the right decision, right? So, but I think if you do what I suggest is to say, always try to keep your sense of being humane and trying to be calm and trying to be rational and to provide evidence for your decisions. Anytime you make a decision that affects many people, you need to get feedback and consultation from all the people first. Listen carefully, listen actively, talk and have them discuss and come back with them to them about, well, here are the principles that I think that are necessary to try and make a decision. Here are the evidence, for what's the data say about if you go this way, that way, or the other way, and then give a rationale. So then and you may make a decision that may make people upset, but they understand the transparency of your decision, and they will like you, not because you made the decision that made them happy, but that they understand the thought process and the deliberation and the evidentiary trail that you're trying to use. And that at the core, you always want to do it ethically and humanely. So I think then that supersedes just being liked. People who just do things to be liked, to me, that shows a sense of, not being confident, not being competent in your decision making, and sometimes almost being cowardly, right? Because you're trying to just please other people. And that's not the goal of leadership. It's not to always please everyone. It's to make the right decision with the right amount of consultation on principled pillars, if you will. And so if you do that, then your competence will never really be called into question. Or if they say, well, we believe your data is wrong, then you can always say, well, tell me why. Show me what's wrong with the data. Let's talk about it. Being a leader also means being able to say, you made a mistake. Hey, I made a mistake. I am sorry, I didn't understand that other piece of data. Let's talk it over. And you can change your mind and change the decision, but it has to be done in a principled and rational, reasonable kind of way. So does that help at all?
I appreciate that very much. Absolutely. We have one more question from Manteca Unified. They ask, is there a moral / ethical line where agreement is not necessary?
Yes, of course. I never say that I'm going to agree with everybody all the time. That's just not reality. That might be Hollywood, but it's not reality. So especially in a world as diverse and as complicated as the world we live in today, you have to expect diversity of opinion. In fact, I welcome diversity of opinion, because if you have diverse opinions, you will in general make a better informed decision because you understand all the different perspectives and factors that people are taking on a particular issue, and you'll never be blindsided. Because if you only listen to people who tell you what you want to hear, then you will get blindsided because you have never heard the other sides, right? So, agreeing to agree does not make sense in my mind. And just because, as I said, you can disagree with a person on one issue. I mean, let's see, what's his name? I'm blanking. He was a famous congressman, Tip O'Neill. It's probably, you guys are too young to know who Tip O'Neill was, but he was so famous for being on, deeply passionate Democrat. But he would cross the aisle to his Republican side and say, hey, can we find a tipping point where we can agree on some issues? They could vehemently disagree with each other, but then they had such respect. Or even thinking about Ruth Bader Ginsburg and Scalia, two extraordinarily divergent thinkers on the nation's highest Supreme Court, had divergent, dramatically passionate arguments against on a given issue. But at the end of the day, they deeply respected each other and treated each other with that care and authentic respect. So I think that, there's having people who always agree with you, that it's kind of it's a very non-conflicted life, but it's a very boring life. And you don't learn and grow and deepen your understanding of the nuances of an issue if you don't open yourself up to listening to the other sides. So yes, there's always, in my mind, there's never a reason to always agree. Like even your spouses, as spouses, do you ever agree on every single thing? If that's true, I don't know what planet you live on, but it's just a true fact of human beings. There will never be 100% synchronicity from that standpoint. You have to learn to give and take and appreciate that.
Thank you. I think we'll take one more question from the chat before we begin to wrap up. Pam Wright asks, with regard to public speaking, how do you suggest people practice or hone that skill so that they aren't fearful or scared of it?
Well, many things. I would say, what is that? Let's see, it's an old-fashioned group. Toastmasters. Have you heard of Toastmasters? Oh, a lot of you are nodding. Yes, so Toastmasters does exist. And I never signed up for it. I will tell you that I'm actually naturally a more shy person, but I had to push myself for so long that now I finally feel comfortable. I can go into a room, like my husband used to have to take me by the elbow and say, go talk to all these people. You know, this is before I became a president, because it wasn't natural for me to just wander into a room and be gregarious and reach out to people and shake their hands. And I had to force myself to learn that. And by the same token, speaking publicly is not easy to do. But what I would say is that you have to practice. Toastmasters can be an extremely, because everyone there is trying to improve, and they're supportive of each other. They don't critique each other. I don't know, has anyone here been to Toastmasters? Raise your hands, some of you. So a lot of men more likely try Toastmasters, and women are not as often, and it's more frightening to go in because you go into Toastmasters and they're all men, and then maybe you're only a handful of women there. Maybe that's something that you all can do, is start a women's Toastmaster group or something. But that's something that is one obvious way to do it. The other is to join committees, like I said, and start to practice your voice talking up in committees. And then let's see, you can take speech classes, at the community college. You can take them at your own college. There are probably even online courses where you can practice doing public speaking as well. So that's a little bit harder, but you practice. You will not be good unless you practice. It is just one of those skills. It's like riding a bike. You have to keep trying to get on that bike, and we'll fall down. But the more you do it, the more practiced and more comfortable you'll get. And here's the other thing. Now that you have Zoom, I would tell you, you could do your speech on Zoom, record it and watch yourself, and give it to your most trusted, kindest friend and say, watch this for me. How did I look? Did it tell me, am I saying too many ums, or did I move my head too much? Or, so to have trusted colleagues, you can do it on Zoom, absolutely. This is something I do with my students. When I just have a student who started, this last week was her first week at Stanford, and she's in the physician's assistant program. And so we prepared together for her interviews, which were on Zoom. So I interviewed her 3 times. We even tested the lighting. I said, well, what kinds of jackets do you have? What color? Don't put on too much makeup. We talked about all that stuff. So that's where having a mentor can really help. But now Zoom technology will allow you to do a lot. You can record yourself and send it to a friend who doesn't even live with you, lives across the state, across the country, and say, I'm trying to practice for an interview. This is what I'm going to say. These are questions. What do you think? Right? So that's a low stakes way of doing it as well.
Thank you very much for taking the time to address those questions and for sharing your presentation with us. I'm going to now kick it over to Janine to close us out this evening.
Thank you
so much.
Thank you, Dr. Junn. Thank you for sharing your beautiful family history with us tonight, and showing us how to be vulnerable with that. And I also just wanted to thank you for sharing your lessons. I truly appreciated that you gave us tangible strategies to be able to go out, things that we can actually leave this meeting and do tonight or do tomorrow. As a teacher, you always think about that, what are our students walking away with? And I took so many different notes of your words. And so I just wanted to thank you. A couple of things I just wanted to call out as well under your second lesson, as far as outcomes driven, becoming an outcomes driven high performer, the advice of documenting our outcomes it's so hard. Oftentimes as women and just in general, being able to really create artifacts of our successes so that we can share those, um, and not wanting to seem like we're bragging or whatever it might be, but the importance of actually documenting those outcomes, how that builds up our confidence, because it also is such a wonderful example for other women and young women as they grow their professional careers. So thank you for that. And thank you for this evening. I'm inspired.
Good.
I am, and again, thank you for being with us this evening. And I just want to say, keep going out and changing the world and making it better.
Oh, thank you, Janine. And thank you all for inviting me to be a part of your Women's Together series. Really, it was really fun and I enjoyed it very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Chelsea, it's just, okay. Thank you, everyone, and have a wonderful evening.
Okay. Dr. Wash will be hopping off right now and Jess had to hop off, but for those of us still on here, I thought it went really well. Let me end our recording.